Hi everybody!
The Trails games are my favorite games of all time. Also, with the deep lore-heavy world Nihon Falcom have created with this series, there are tons of eras within the game universe that are alluded to but not necessarily covered. One of those eras is the War of the Lions. The events of this are heavily referenced during the Erebonian arc, which wrapped up as of Trails into Reverie. Like the title suggests, this really sets up possibilities, and one of those possibilities is a tactical RPG, which are slowly gaining in popularity in no small part thanks to titles like Fire Emblem. In all honesty, a tactical Trails game would be brilliant, but first I'll cover why the War of the Lions is the ideal era within the world of Western Zemuria for a tactical game. Of all of the eras, the War of the Lions is still one that is relatively shrouded in mysteries. Of course, you don't always need to shine a light on every piece of lore, as that means you lose some of the allure. But the events of the War of the Lions are so vast, they could keep a lot of the mysteries shrouded. The events of this era of Erebonian history lasted from 947 to 952 of the Septian calendar, so clearly there's a fair bit of time to cover there, and a ton of characters as well. By doing this title, Nihon Falcom would merely be adding extra depth to an already lore-rich franchise, and it's an era fans of the series have wanted covered for a long time. While it is true we know the story of Emperor Dreikel's because of the events of Cold Steel, it would be amazing to actually see it told from his perspective entirely. The game would also cover such a wide array of time that it could be absolutely massive. To make the massive undertaking easier, the chapters could be broken down by us experiencing the events of the war via the Diary of Dreikel's. By doing this, they'd also be able to condense the events down to just one game. While I would absolutely love it if this became a massive spin-off for Falcom, I have to remain realistic. Falcom is a super tiny studio, and the fact we get yearly games from them is beyond incredible. While Falcom don't have a tactical JRPG in their catalog at the moment, it would be a good move for them. As much as I love the Trails and Ys franchises respectively, and they do a ton to keep the games fresh, they are to a degree formulaic at times. That isn't a knock on them. They found what works, and they iterate on that, which is something I can respect. However, it would be a good idea if they expanded a little bit. Right now, tactical RPGs are seeing a small resurgence for whatever reason. Fire Emblem is bigger than ever, and Disgaea has a new lease on life after making the transition to 3D. The move from 2D to 3D isn't one I'm a fan of, but you have to realize most gamers these days prefer 3D characters to 2D ones. Also, if Falcom were to try a tactical game, this era of history from the Trails universe makes the most sense, given the various princes vying for the Erebonian throne were commanding large armies at the time. A traditional turn-based JRPG just wouldn't make too much sense for this title. Do I think this will ever happen? Probably not. But it's pretty fun to think about. Falcom could even bring ideas from the modern Trails games into this one. Brave Orders would of course make perfect sense. Also, elements of the gameplay introduced to the Erebonian arc, such as having characters linked, could work, of course, in a tactical RPG by having specific units linked together. They could then attack in unison or give varying types of support depending on what classes the characters are. The only aspect I could see being problematic mechanically speaking and from a lore perspective is the implementation of arts, since we wouldn't have battle orbments at this time since the Orbal Revolution happens well after the fact. Rosalia at least makes sense for spellcasting since she's a member of the Hexen clan, so she can do spellcasting innately. If one of my fellow Trails fans can think of a way to give non-Hexen clan members the ability to spellcast, let me know in the comments section. Anyways, next up we're covering why I don't think this project would ever happen. As much as I want this to happen, and I think it'd be a nice little spin-off for Falcom to flesh out the world building of an already lore-rich world, I don't think it'll happen for the simple fact Falcom at present are just too small a company. They know what works for them, and they rarely take risks in their franchises. Tokyo Xanadu was kind of an oddity, though there are now rumors Tokyo Xanadu 2 is in the works, since Falcom themselves have really been going crazy with teases after the announcement of the Nintendo Switch port of the first title. So unless Falcom really grows in terms of numbers of employees and increases the amount of resources they've got, I really don't see this happening at all. Also, despite the resurgence of tactical RPGs in recent years, they're a very niche subgenre of JRPGs, and the likelihood of them ever moving beyond that is slim to none. Also, going off that, people are less likely to take a chance on an RPG of that type from a lesser known developer, even though Falcom have started making a name for themselves in the West, and they're basically a household name in Japan. So yeah, this game likely isn't to happen, but it's a cool thought process. However, that doesn't mean I don't want it to desperately happen, which I really do, so I'm going to cover some of the reasons why I want this to happen. The first, I've already touched on. I'd really like to see the War of the Lions shown on screen and not just mentioned. With the Erebonian arc being the most popular of all of the Trails arcs to this point in time, having more games in that setting means it's likely fans of the arc are going to buy more content related to it. I know that if Falcom were to do more games within the Erebonian Empire, I would play them, simply because this is a storyline that got me hooked on the franchise. Admittedly, I'd buy any game of previous arcs as well, were Falcom to release smaller scale titles related to them, which brings me to my next point on this idea. Let's face it, this game would be a smaller scale one. It doesn't have to be an 80+ hour marathon the Trails games tend to be. Falcom could make this a much more digestible 10 to 30 hour experience that is nice and focused, and put it out at a much lower price point. Because let's face it, we've all given a game at a lower price point a punt just to see if it was worth our time. Sometimes this works out incredibly well, and sometimes it blows up in our face like one of Capcan's traps. Since I've brought it up, name some games that you took a punt on just because it was cheap. I think this could be a fun little discussion. I feel like releasing this game at a launch price of $40 would probably be the sweet spot. Another reason I'd like to see Falcom do something like this is because it means we could then get more stories within the world of Zemuria that focus on other timeframes. The Great Collapse is another one often alluded to that we have almost zero knowledge about, and it would just be nice to add even more meat to the bones of an already meaty franchise. What are some eras of history from the Trails universe you'd like to see explored in more detail? Let me know in the comments section, as there's literally tons we could pull from here. Anyways, let's move on to my final point. Let's face it, Falcom is a pretty innovative developer, even if they often just iterate on the formula of their games once they've got it well established. Even though there's lots that can be done with tactical RPGs, they aren't the most innovative when it comes to formula. They do some things well, and they do some cool things, but I can't think of any major innovations on the formula in recent times. I'm glad to be wrong, and if I am, correct me in the comments. But this has me intrigued by the idea. Falcom could really do something innovative with tactical RPGs if they gave it an attempt. I can't pinpoint any specific innovation they could attempt, but I know if they tried, they'd find one. So there's my idea for a cool Trails spin-off. What are some spin-off ideas you want to see from this franchise? Please do let me know. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, why not check out some more of my Trails content? You could check out why you need to play the Trails series this year, or you could check out where you should start the franchise. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.